In 2018, certain points in Los Angeles were transformed very, very lovingly back to 1969. It was like time travel. Quentin Tarantino was making the movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and certain pockets of Los Angeles were actually taken back to look exactly the way they did in 1969. I was around for some of the filming of the movie, and I got to see some of the movie cars up close. Some of the cars that were used in the movie were based on real cars that belonged to real people like Jay Sebring and Abigail Folger, and the car that Tex Watson drove on the night of the murders. The blue Karmann Ghia that you see here, 1968 Karmann Ghia, doesn't really have a representation in real life to any of the people. But it was a car that meant something to Quentin Tarantino. It was a bit of a nod to one of his films, Kill Bill, and it showed up a lot in the movie, and it was auctioned off not that long ago, but I got to get a good look at it first, as will you. Now, here is the black Porsche that featured in the film. It was based on Jay Sebring's actual Porsche. The car that was used in the film was a 1973 model. Jay himself drove a 1968 model, but they're very close in appearance, so Tarantino kind of, faked it. Now, you can see the car parked at the Tate house. This is 10050 Cielo Drive. This is the actual Porsche after the Tate murders when Jay was murdered in the house. You can see parked next to it is a 1968 Firebird, a Pontiac Firebird. That car in real life belonged to Abigail Folger. Now, that car does still exist. The real car does still exist, but I had the opportunity to see the movie car recently. A gentleman who owns it, who collects cars, was very kind to reach out to me and offered me a ride. So I went to Vegas and got a ride in the 1968 Firebird that was featured in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I'll show you that in a little bit. And lastly, you can see on this movie poster, it features a 1959 Ford Fairlane. Now, they did create a Ford Fairlane for the movie. I didn't get a chance to see that, but I did see the original. This is the actual car that Tex Watson drove. This is the actual car that Charles Manson drove during the 2 nights of the Tate LaBianca murders, late in the nights of August 8th and 9th, 1969. This is the real car. Tarantino didn't want to use the real car. He could have, but he thought it was a bit creepy to do that, so he had an identical car made. He took another car, same year, same model, bashed it in, put in all the rust spots in all the right places and the scratches, etc. It looks exactly like the original, but this is the original, and you're going to see it up close in a little bit. I'll also show you some other shots of various cars around Los Angeles that during that summer that they were filming. Just it was magic, and I hope you enjoy these vehicles. One of the locations that Tarantino brought back was the Jay Sebring Salon on Fairfax. He actually put Jay Sebring Salon back where Jay Sebring Salon was. And if you look closely in front of the shop, I know this is grainy footage, you'll see the Porsche that's parked in front. Now, here's a better picture of it. The Porsche that's parked there is a movie prop. It's a 1973 911. Now, Jay Sebring actually owned in real life a 1968, but they look similar enough, so that's why Tarantino used it. It's a rear-engine 5-speed air-cooled motor. Now, this location actually didn't make it into the movie, into the final cut. It will be released at some point with the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile and all that other stuff. That will show up in some extended version whenever they do decide to release that. But my buddy Patrick was there when they were filming in Westwood, and you can see here's Margot Robbie at the movie theater filming that scene, and he got to get some good looks at it. And here are a couple of more pictures of the Porsche parked in front of Jay Sebring Salon. Again, this is a 1973 911. Jay himself owned a 1968 911. Next up is the blue Karmann Ghia that Brad Pitt, or Cliff Booth was his character, drove in the film. Now, when it was up for auction not that long ago, this is the description that came with it. This car, a 1968 Volkswagen Karmann Ghia, seen as Cliff Booth hurtled down Cielo Drive comes from the production Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It has a 2.5-liter Subaru engine from Jazz Products. It was installed for the actor's ease at the Field Group manual valve body reversed pattern. I don't even know what that means. I understand that Brad Pitt couldn't drive a stick shift and they made it so it was an automatic drive. That's what I remember. Of course, I'm sure there will be corrections. Feel free to put them in the comments below. In addition to its distinctive retractable sunroof, the vehicle's many amenities include charcoal color leather and cotton fiber-backed padded seats, teardrop-shaped brake lights, polished chrome detail, and an installed fuel cell. They mentioned that the car is actually a nod to the car that Uma Thurman drove in Kill Bill 2. It's not a duplicate of it, but Tarantino just wanted to give it acknowledgement, and just that was his sort of Easter egg, was a nod to Kill Bill 2. With the custom paint color personally requested by Quentin Tarantino. Now, it says that this was one of 2 Karmann Ghias used for the film, and it says it exhibited some signs from the production, including scuffs and some rusting to the front and back bumpers, the body, and the driver's side door. While the interior and exterior paint have been restored for display, it remains in good and operable condition. Now, as I understand it, the best I could chase down, the Karmann Ghia sold in 2020 for $62,500. Here's a small clip I took of Brad Pitt driving the car down Hollywood Boulevard when they were shooting it, and how it ended up in the movie. Next up is the 1959 Ford Fairlane Galaxie 500. I don't even know if I'm saying that the correct way, and I'm sure that'll be pointed out to me. The real car, the actual real Ford Galaxie 500 that was used by Tex Watson and Charles Manson for those 2 infamous helter-skelter nights in 1969, the car exists, and this is it. It was owned by one of the ranch hands at Spahn's Ranch, John Swartz. After the crimes, the car was impounded, it was stored, and ended up in collectors' hands. Now, the owner of the car reached out to me and asked if I was interested in seeing it, on the condition that I keep the information of ownership and location private, which, of course, I have. But the owner knew I'd appreciate the historic significance of the vehicle. For filming Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Tarantino was given access to the real car to use in the film, the real 1969, quote, murder car. Tarantino thought it brought too creepy of a vibe to the film. Instead, he found an identical 1959 Ford model, had it repainted and perfectly duplicated for the film, down to the upholstery. I mean, every speck of rust, every dent, it was all perfectly recreated for the film. Now, bizarrely, the 1976 film version of Helter Skelter, they actually did use the real murder car for the film. The real murder car. Now, in 2020, the duplicate movie car, the screen car, was up for auction, and the minimum was not reached. However, even more bizarrely, the original Ford Galaxie owner is now the owner of the screen-used Galaxie as well. They both exist in the same place. Next up is my sentimental favorite, the 1968 Pontiac Firebird 400. The yellow car was owned by Abigail Folger, and here it is parked at the house on Cielo Drive the morning after Helter Skelter. Now, the car does still exist. The actual Abigail Folger Pontiac Firebird does still exist, and it belongs in a private collection. For filming, they got an identical model. I was there for the day they used the Pontiac Firebird for the scene when the actors arrived to the El Coyote restaurant. They pull up in the driveway, and the 4 actors representing the 4 victims of the murders got out of the car and walked into the restaurant with smiles on their faces. It was an incredible moment. So the actual car that they used was up for auction. It didn't sell. But weirdly, not that long ago, a guy by the name of Henry Mateus reached out to me, and he's the owner, and he lives in Vegas. And he offered to show me the car. And of course, I went to Vegas. But I'm in Vegas right now with my new friend Henry Mateus, and it's so nice to meet you, Henry.
Nice to meet you too.
Henry reached out a couple of weeks ago because he had a very special car, and that was used in a very special movie, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Great movie.
It really is.
It.
So I was very excited. So I was coming to Vegas, and I asked him, and Henry said he'd come and show it to us. And my good friend Brandon, behind the camera right now, offered to shoot this. So we get to see Henry's car, his car collection, because you've got a whole bunch of cars. I'm very excited to see that.
I have too many, actually. I'm trying to sell some. So
to collectors, there's never too many, though, right?
I know. I need to build a bigger garage.
Well, cool. I'm excited. I'm excited to see this thing.
Okay, let's open it up, shall we?
Nice. You got the reveal going. This is great. Wow. So you got to tell me what made you go for the for Abigail for the Firebird?
Well, my addiction to muscle cars, first of all, is I look on Facebook Marketplace and I look on Craigslist and the classic car sites almost every day. I look. So I was searching. I just did a random search for 1968 Pontiac Firebird on Craigslist in Las Vegas, and boom, it popped up.
That's
and the funny thing is, the Atomic Motors had it, and Bill's a really good friend of mine.
Wow,
the owner.
Really?
Yeah, and my band plays over there a lot of the times when they have events. He hires us when they'll have their car shows and festivals. And he got the car on consignment from the movie company that had it.
It's a beautiful yellow, but it's like a, I don't know, what's the word, cloudy yellow or something?
It's like a butternut.
Yeah, okay.
I think, what was the technical color? See, General Motors, they had Chevy and they had Pontiac, and they made the identical colors for the cars, but they named them differently. So Pontiac had a different name for this as opposed to what Chevy would call it. Really weird.
And this is where there's a sticker.
You can see the residue left from the STP sticker.
That is really cool.
That they had put on it, because that's how Abigail Folger had on her car.
That is so wild, and it's such a trend. The Bradley sticker. I mean, she worked for Bradley. You know, she wanted to get Bradley elected, and obviously she didn't live that long to find out he wouldn't be.
And I don't know if you got a good look at it up close when you were there. You were an advisor on the film, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I put a new dashboard on it because it was all cracked up, which didn't matter in the film because they didn't do close-ups, of the dashboard.
Yeah.
Things
probably
like that.
Was about, I would say, about 30 seconds, if that much of screen time in the movie.
Well, what's cool is at the end of the movie, when the credits are rolling, the car is sitting there in the shot for several minutes.
Yeah.
And you see it there. So
I remember now.
The scenes, I think it was in, you see it in 3 different scenes. You see it pulling up to the gate, the property, so you see the back, and then the end credits where it's in the shot, and then of course when they go to El Coyote, and Margot Robbie's sitting right there in that seat. Yeah, that's cool. So
it was really cool.
So there's 3 scenes. I mean, it's
you don't
great.
mind if I touch it, do you?
Oh, not at all. Go ahead.
Okay, this is really.
I'll pull it out and we can go for a ride. No problem. But,
I love that.
I love that they.
Before we do that, though, what I wanted to do is I wanted to give you something as a thank you. I've got a matchbook and a magnet from the El Coyote.
Oh, awesome! Thank you.
And
that's way cool.
A car air freshener from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Oh yeah. That's another thing. Now, did this dog food really exist?
No,
or was that made up? I love it.
Up.
Raccoon flavor and the different cans that he had.
The rat flavor.
Great. It's brilliant.
You look so cool right now. Wow.
I think it's on the side. The lever.
No, I got that. I don't want to.
Oh,
I don't want to fuck up the. Go ahead.
Okay. Really cool.
So you're in a band?
Yeah.
Just tell me, because I feel like an idiot not knowing.
Yeah, I'll give you my business card. I have a band. It's called Vinyl Fever, and we play We play classic rock, mostly 80s and late 70s. And we do a few like 60s Doors, Rolling Stone kind of things like that. So we do cover stuff.
Oh, now how old are you? What year were you born?
64.
64. Okay, so you were around for it too.
Yeah, I was I think Quentin Tarantino's a year or two older than me. That's I've seen his interviews, how he was a child as well. And see, I remember a lot of that stuff too. My parents, I'm the youngest. They had 4 boys, and they would take us to the drive-in, and we would see a lot of those movies.
So, do you remember then? Do you remember the murders happening, or do you remember?
My brother Al is 4 years older than me, so he talked about it. I remember when it happened. He was like, he saw it on the news, and at that age, I was about 5 years old. I was just about to be 5. I was a week away, and I didn't understand, most of that. I watched the Monkees and we watched, shows and stuff, but I didn't really understand the news a whole lot. And I guess people say that was when everybody started locking their doors and windows. It changed everything.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I always use the analogy of Abigail Folger. She was reading a book in bed. That's it. 20 minutes later, that was her on the front lawn. But
people, once they caught Manson and his followers, then I do remember my brother again making a big fuss about it. Oh, they finally caught these people, and then now Manson, became a household name, but there was no internet yet, so people weren't Googling where they lived and stuff like that. So
I think that made it more frightening, though, because all you got were little specks of information. Symbolically, you just know that pregnant woman was murdered, and then you just don't get that much more information, and it left so much more for people's imaginations. Because they would publish that crazy picture of Manson, and it's like that's all you get. This is the guy, and then that's it. That was so terrifying.
I do remember when I first saw the car on there, I said, "See, look at that, best car ever made, Pontiac Firebird." I didn't imagine owning the actual car.
Yeah.
I just knew that ever since I was about 10 years old, my favorite car was always a 1969 Pontiac Firebird convertible. So when I saw this in the film, I knew right away what year it was. I didn't know that Abigail Folger drove a 68 Firebird. I didn't know that at the time. So when I saw the car in the movie, I identified it immediately as a 68. And then, of course, I did more research, and I found pictures of the actual crime scene, and the car is there in the background.
Yeah.
So, 440 and big motors and all that.
This is cool.
Now, this one, the other thing about this car, I don't know if you might know, is it's actually a 350. But they put the 400 on the back there because that's what Abigail had, and they wanted to make it
amazing.
Yeah, so that's it. They added this to make it look just like Abigail's car. But this one actually has a 350.
So the original one, I guess, I was looking at the paperwork. You've probably looked around. You've probably seen the documentation from the original one, and how it was valued.
Yes.
There was Peter Folger was on the title, I think, who was Abigail's father, and it was valued. Hers was valued at $2,000 at the time of the murders.
And what do they call that? Her estate, or whatever, probate or whatever it is. They value whatever property she had.
Mm-hmm.
And that was shocking. They valued the car around $2,000.
But what would it have retailed back then?
That's what the retail on this car back then, I think, was somewhere between 24 and 28, depending on the extras that you got. And they went into the detail because I guess they sold Abigail Folger the aftermarket rims. These are American Racing aftermarket rims. They're very expensive. So I don't know if she wanted them that way or her boyfriend wanted them that way. Because these are not the Pontiac Rally stock rims. And I just thought, when I first saw it in the movie, I said, I wonder if the real car had the aftermarket rims on it. And of course it did. It had the aftermarket rims, so they made it identical. We want to get in the driver's seat?
Yeah,
What do you want to do?
Yeah, if I could.
You can be the driver.
This will be relevant in a later video, but I'm holding on to Abigail Folger's high school yearbook. Henry's such a friendly, kind guy, and he's going to show you a little bit more of his car collection in just a moment. But for now, for the next minute, I'll show you some of the background vehicles from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Stay tuned for Henry. But anyway, I'm going to turn this around because you got to see this. I mean, look at this. Look at these cars. Is this mental or what? I'm going to walk around here so you can see this. God, even the magazines. Look at that. This is like great school stuff. The old U-Haul. A little dirty, but surfboard. Station wagon with the hand roller thing. God, I wonder if that disappears into it rather than open and shut. I bet you it does. It lowers, I think. Oh no, it isn't open shut. Poor bear. Well, you gotta go to Quentin Tarantino, man. He's not doing any CGI shit. This is the real deal. Real locations. Real cars. Don't forget to stick around for just a moment and you'll see Henry's car collection. I want to thank a couple of people. Jordan the Lion for hooking me up with the Karmann Ghia, my buddy Patrick for the information on the Porsche, my friend Brandon Lee from the podcast Talks from the Crypt, who had me on his show recently, and for the camera work. Henry Mateus, my buddy who owns the Pontiac Firebird, thank you so much for being so kind and inviting me to your home and letting me ride around in that very cool car. And a big thank you to Quentin Tarantino for creating that wonderful bookend to my time in Hollywood. Thank you everyone for your time. Thank you very much for your attention. And until next time. You heard me. Nice. You got the reveal going. This is great. Wow. Look at that in a GTO. Oh, I love it.
I don't know if my neighbors love me or if my neighbors hate me. I think they love the car.
They're beautiful. What a rainbow. The colors are just
I'm a color
mind-blowing.
guy. I love colors.
Wow. And this is the same shade as the Monkey Mobile, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I think the Monkey Mobile was a 67, something like that. This is a 68, but pretty much very similar, almost identical body style, almost. And then the Monkey Mobile, they cut out the trunk and they put a bench.
Okay.
And then they built that custom canopy top for it. So
Wow.
I thought of maybe doing that, but I don't want to do that to this beautiful.
This is beautiful. No, you're not. This is incredible. I love GTO is my favorite car.
Yeah, most people love GTOs. I do love GTOs, but my favorite are the Firebirds. I have two. I have the orange one, 69.
Nice.
And it's hard to walk around in here.
But it's okay to walk around in
here? You can squeeze through.
I promise I
you
won't
can squeeze
scratch
through.
anything. Wow. And you use these cars?
I drive them. Now, when I got them, like this one was yellow and it needed a paint job.
Yeah.
This one was a teal and it definitely needed a paint job. Same with the GTO. It was patina. It was all red and sanded down and ready for paint.
Yeah.
I got it from a guy. It's sad. There was a guy building it. He rebuilt the motor. He rebuilt the transmission. He was out in Pahrump. Then he got COVID and passed away.
Oh, man.
And the car sat in a garage for a year. And then his wife finally decided to get rid of the car. It was ready. He had it all ready for paint. All the things were off. The badges, the mirrors, everything was just ready to be painted. So I took it, trailered it over, had it painted, and it ran great and everything.
Well, it went to someone who loves it, though. That's the important thing.
Yeah, I definitely fixed it up. But that's the story with almost all these cars. When I get them, they're lacking some things, whether it's engine, transmission, or interiors or whatever. And I think I get a pretty good deal on them, and then I put a little money into them.
That I've never seen that color before.
Yeah, and I think it's funny because I believe in 1973, that is a 1973, they offered that color, but there aren't that many.
What is it called?
But that's a repaint. I call it teal, so I don't even know what the actual color is. I could be wrong, but I saw you know, the die-cast metal toys.
Yeah.
They have those, and it looked identical to that car, so they must have made it that way.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they wouldn't have made a replica of it.
Yeah.
So most of the Challengers I see are this big bad green color over here, like the AMX.
Very, very nice. And what's the purple car?
1973 Plymouth Roadrunner.
Nice.
Yeah, that's our favorite. My girlfriend loves that. My father loves that. And I love the color. So
we had a color similar to that. It was called Plum Crazy.
yeah, that's what they called that
Yeah.
back then. And then they made the new Challengers. You know, when they started making the Plum Crazies a little brighter.
Yeah.
It jumps out at you.
It was like this. I always call them like Dodgem cars. It was like that. It was, to me, it seemed like that kind of glistening paint color.
It's amazing. But that's the original paint.
That's
of
beautiful.
That car. It looks pretty good.
It does.
I touched it up. It had no body damage when I got it, but it had some chips in the paint. I touched it up. When you get close, you can tell, but it's a beautiful car.
These are all incredible. Like they all look superior. I mean, they look really, really gorgeous.